Well,
So what were we talking about?
going into paradise, into the garden, the forbidden garden, venturing with your mind into the forbidden land of knowledge, and wondering where da'at leads to death.
Mm-hmm. Dath is the Syrian pronunciation of Dath.
Or the Yemenite pronunciation. But either way, you eat from the forbidden fruit and there's no turning back.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain point where you reach a crisis in what you were calling emunat mima, just emunat or emunat chachamim, or like accepting the authority of those dead Jewish white males, right?
Or as my grandmother said today, this is a thing of the past. It's antiquated.
Therefore, let us learn the classics.
No, therefore I answer her. I answer her. You're absolutely right. And if you came on my friend's tour, you would see that. Yes, we are antiquated, but everybody's antiquated. But they are all dead, and we're still alive.
It's not that we're still alive; it's that they are still alive through us.
Yes.
Which is very significant.
Yeah.
So there's a great book that expresses this dichotomy of being too smart for your own good, but realizing that that simplicity is necessary. It's called Xenocide.
Yeah.
It's the sequel to Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game.
Mm-hmm.
He has Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, and Children of the Mind, which is really supposed to be an extension of Xenocide. Familiar somewhat with the Ender's Game?
I know that I heard the name of the author. I never read the book.
Ender's Game is also a kid's book. There was recently a movie that was made about it with Asa Butterfield, that kid who did Hugo. But the movie starts with him as a 16-year-old, and the book starts with him as a 6-year-old. So it's a huge. It's a post-apocalyptic world in which aliens have destroyed planet Earth, almost completely destroyed it once, and the second time we launched the attack. Through countries uniting, and this is after we won the final war on these aliens, these bugs, these big ants. Humanity goes into some sort of fighting again and back and forth, and Ender sort of just whatever. He's an adult now. He's not a kid anymore. So he becomes what's called the Speaker for the Dead. And the Speaker for the Dead basically means he...
Sounds like Hillary Clinton.
But it's... Oh my God. No, but he's like a person who does eulogies, but he studies, he researches a particular person's life to be able to speak for the dead. Yeah. So there's this murder that happens on the outskirts of the galaxy, some planet which is colonized by these Brazilian dudes, which is really fun because I love the Portuguese. And there are these creatures that they live with on the planet, and these creatures are trees. They're like walking creatures, which then become trees.
You shall not pass.
And there's a murder that happens with one of them murdered one of the humans, and he's investigating it, and he makes some astonishing discoveries.
Woody Harrelson?
I never get your references.
It's an actor. His name is Woody Harrelson.
Oh.
Woody.
Woody. Woody. That's Monty Python.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very Woody. Whatever that means. Probably something like naughty.
Yes.
So there's this other planet with Chinese super brainiacs who are controlled by a particular gene which impacts, or neuron or whatever, that impacts them and turning them into obsessive compulsive religious believers. It's a legit kind of OCD.
So they go to Harnoff, is what you're saying.
Yeah, my God.
Just folded it today.
Yeah, by the way, if you keep talking into your hand, we'll hear every word you say.
Mr. Hand.
Not.
Yes.
Talk to the hand, Mr. Handman. To quote not Bruce Lee, whatever the guy's name is in Enter the Dragon. Mr. Handman.
Oh,
that's what the black guy calls him.
Not Kong.
Mr. Handman.
Not King.
Where he gets killed.
Whatever.
No, but the black guy, the karate guy with the afro, so he says, "BS, Mr. Handman."
Yeah, and then he slashes him.
Yes, I remember that. It's awful.
It's a great movie.
Yeah. Great movie, yes. Anyway, so this other planet is basically, they have like this OCD which keeps them under control because they're really, really smart. And they're employed by the galactic government in order to basically figure out something that has to do with Ender and kill that planet. And he has to save it, and they have to, whatever, there's a whole thing. There's this one girl whose father basically teaches her the ways of the Force, like how to be super smart, etc., but how to navigate that with...
Use the Schwartz.
Yes, merchandise, which is China, to keep their faith, but she's too smart to keep the faith, and he's able to give her this framework which explains to her. you can totally change the words there with some kind of a shkafic science discussion.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
So he tries to basically Baal Tshuva somebody who's too smart for that.
Yeah.
She ends up making the spoiler alert. She ends up being on the verge of like once she recognized that the whole thing was fake and they actually found a cure for it in order that she can actually stop being OCD and be free. She becomes free of it, and she chooses to force herself to do the OCD thing she would do, like basically follow grains of wood on the floor. Like that was her particular OCD. Yeah, it's funny. Like when you realize that there's this whole like every person has their own calling. They have a language for it. It's kind of way of expressing it. So she forces herself to go back to that, and every chapter has these reflections about her from her diary about why she forces herself to do this, even though she realizes it's BS at a certain point, because it's an amazing thing. It's a really brilliant.
What's
idea.
BS? BS is the.
It was an OCD. The government planted something in their brains to make them control.
But he was trying to Makarov her to the OCD, or wait?
He at first, I think, like something happened, and he also realized it was BS. But his wife died, and he sort of gave into it.
So what are you saying? What I'm doing is BS, basically.
Basically, he knows it, but she bought
is
into it. But then he was able to snap out of it, but she refused to accept it, and she just turned around. She snapped. So there's a certain level of understanding that once you reach that level of understanding, the only way you can turn away from it is force yourself to be stupid.
Yeah.
And that's what Richard Dawkins wrote about this guy who was a devoted Christian who got a degree in chemistry and something like that. And then he wrote something about how he ripped every single page out of it and he's expecting to hear the Bible. And then he says, like, my textbook, anything that contradicted the Bible. It's like there's something about the religious zeal which won't allow a person to look in the truth. So that's not our way.
Yeah.
And the Rambam makes it very clear, and his son continues that idea that when you need to, simplify things in the most possible way and reinterpret.
So here's my question: how did that become our way for certain people? And I notice it becomes our way for Baalei Tshuva, where they go and somebody legitimately convinces them through some logical arguments and this and that. Like, I'm not even going to mention like Zamir Cohen, but I mean like legitimate people who really convince them through logical things.
They do Pascal's wager, all kinds
not
of
just Pascal, they do like different, like Aish has their own thing, these guys have their own thing.
The Discovery program used to be a much tougher one.
So these are legit things, and people are like, okay, now they're like, okay, I'm convinced, and then they also see stuff like I saw in my own life, experiential things and this and that experiences. So there's it's hard to just turn away from that, and then you come to people and you say, well, I have this kasha for you, I have this difficulty, and then they're like, I don't want to hear it. Like, I'm cool with hearing it. For me, it's just an exercise in intellectual.
It's a hard thing to answer.
It doesn't shake my emunah.
On the one hand, you can say that the Holocaust destroyed Judaism because that emunah, that direct connection that was breastfed, was lost. But on the other hand, you had the Giselschaft happening, you had the Haskalah happening, you had the Enlightenment happening.
But you know what's funny? If you look at the problem is like human beings are so funny because they don't understand that if you look at throughout the timeline of Jewish history since Rome, probably. I don't know if 6 million people got killed, but from that point until, let's say, the Russian Revolution, millions of Jews got killed just over a longer stretch of time. And so the main question of people, like, if God is so good, why did a Holocaust happen?
I mean, Martin Luther.
I'm saying, where were you before the Holocaust, where all these Jews were getting pogromed all the time? So it's like, you might as well say, you can use that as an argument.
I'm not really sure. Look, that's whatever. It's not worth going there. But in terms of how is it that what has been substituted for authentic Torah has become gimmicks, which either create really dumb people or turn people away who are intelligent people.
Well, that's part of our generation. People want Instagram.
Right, but like, what's going on? Where did we fail initially in the creation of this concept called kiruv, where it is designed to simplify things in such a way?
I don't think originally it wasn't, and just the generation became a certain way, and then like Aish, for example, they're adapting to they put out videos, 3-minute, 2-minute videos, cute little things.
Okay, you have to know how to get people in to then give them something else. Okay, fine, I get that part. But the point is, once they're in, what are they getting? And I don't know that they are necessarily getting the right thing.
No.
I mean, then again, there's people who are going through a very expensive private Jewish education and are also not getting
So the question is, where's the right
So
thing?
right, what is the right thing? Where is the right thing? How about we standing here saying that we can look at everyone for doing wrong, but somehow we can't really put our finger on what we're doing
Or
right.
as the New Kids on the Block used to say, the right stuff. So,
Yeah.
Singers. Anyway,
Another cultural reference which
Yes.
just went
early
over
90s,
my head.
Early 90s. Anyway,
Early 90s in America
In
with
America.
television.
yes,
Yes. Not Jerusalem without television.
yes. And Mr. Kartoffel.
Oh, Shmuel Kunda?
Yeah.
Anshe Kartoffel Synagogue.
Oh my God. So much I missed that.
So there's something that happens when there's a certain level of awareness of, let's say, historic and logical coherence that you can't go back. You can't say like, well, I don't believe in logic. Like, come on. Once you've seen logic, you know logic works. The question is that everything? And no, it's not everything. Right? Some things don't make sense. But to come and say, oh, well, for example, somebody was telling me this last night when I was talking to him about archaeology and Tanakh, and he completely did not understand what I was saying. This Israeli guy. He was like, well, I have a family member who 3 or 4 of the family members all got breast cancer, and they did this genetic test that showed that they have no statistical variation than any other regular person. They should not be getting, it can't be explained in terms of the odds, but most of the family's getting it. So I didn't even understand what that question means. What is his statement basically?
It's probably a twofold question, like how he's probably trying to.
He's basically saying science isn't everything in very primitive language.
Confirm what you're saying, but also ask the question of why would Hashem.
In other words, there needs to be a Torah answer to that, and then I can go like, so what do you want me to do? Start doing Gilgulim? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to? We don't have.
That's probably the only.
But we're not privy to that
solution.
kind of information. I mean, not necessarily. It could be other things too.
Yeah.
But saying that's
difficult.
basically
It's
saying
difficult.
there's a big mystery behind it, which had you been some sort of
It's a difficult
supernatural
conversation to have.
Right, but people turn to religious answers because they give them comfort, and now they understand it. Now that I understand it, so I don't. I feel at least safe because I know it's in God's hands. And somebody who's a little bit too smart for their own good will look at that and laugh, but then they'll be miserable and lonely. So people will say like, I know I'm going to be miserable and lonely, so I'm going to hold on. But some people actually don't hold on. They realize it's just real to them.
Yeah.
They're not just I'm holding on for dear life. You see people who struggle and hold on.
Yeah. I meet them all the time. A lot of Bali Tshuva also.
Yeah, it's like they know there's something real there, but it's not what they're being told, and they want to keep it together in the family and whatever it is. So what I'm saying is, that was the crazy story, is that Amos Funkelstein was a very, very brilliant scholar and great mind, and nobody really there was no one like him. And he was too smart for his own good, and he ended up really going off the deep end. But they set him up with a chavruta with Adin Steinsaltz, and they wrote the sociology of ignorance together. So there are these two people, these two giants, who like, in Chazal's metaphoric way of speaking, they were learning together, there was a fire surrounding them. It's like, no, you can't get near these guys. And yet, they're all agreeing about these things, but he can't get, he's not turning Steinsaltz into a kofar, and Steinsaltz is making him from, like, so what is
it's just two people, mutual respect, I guess.
That they're learning together. You'd think there would be some kind of impact. Like
there's
nothing Steinsaltz could have said to him?
No, meaning for Steinsaltz, probably there's no one else that he could probably learn with, and that's the guy who's on his level.
And vice versa.
Yeah, but the Gemara, like I just know from my limited learning Gemara, you're not necessarily gonna makar of a guy. You can do all kinds of like intellectual acrobatics. You can sit with somebody, intellectual pursuit.
People study Talmud in complete cold, analytical.
Yeah. Just for like it's an exercise for your brain, So.
Dude, they're studying Talmud in South Korea.
So they think it's the key to success. They think what are the Jews' secret to success, and that's how they want to emulate.
Yeah, it develops the mind. It's logic.
So Steinsaltz he's also tapping into the spiritual aspect. This guy, I don't know, who knows?
I don't know. I mean, you have these interesting characters. It's very interesting.
Eli Wiesel learned Gemara, even though he wasn't like so to speak.
Shurki, Agur.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
Yeah,
the guy from Dalton, same thing. What's his name?
Timothy?
No.
Finally, I got
what's his name? I forget his name. Whatever. The guy that he runs. He's the manager of Dalton.
You have what's interesting when So this is something that I'm struggling with now because I have been exposed to a certain type of scholarship, and then there's archaeology, there's history, and there's things that really make you wonder about a lot of things, and you realize that if you take this to this furthest extent, it'll make you just completely like lose touch. And I see that happening to people, and I see that happening to people in this. Yeah,
You'll become like a guy from the movie Pi. You ever seen the movie?
I did see the movie. I mean, I read the book too.
You'll just you'll start calculating, seeing numbers. It's a beautiful mind. You just get start going.
I don't remember that happening in Pi.
In Pi also, he started seeing
As a
like
kid,
the
he
sequence. No, and later on, he starts seeing the sequence because these rabbis were chasing him and they wanted that secret number or whatever it is, and he just he generated this number and watch the movie again.
You're not talking about Pi. You're talking about the Man Who Knew Infinity. It's
no,
the same actor.
Pi,
the guy who was on this, who was on an escape boat with a tiger.
No, that's Life of Pi. I'm talking about Pi.
Oh.
There's a movie called Pi. A Jewish guy. You have to watch the movie.
I did not see
and
Pi.
In that
I
movie,
saw Life of Pi.
He meets a Hasidic guy, Balshuva guy, gives him like gematria. He's sitting in a coffee shop, gematrias, and then they introduce him to this. You gotta watch the movie. It's very interesting.
I heard some.
It was directed by the same guy. He directed A Serious Man. Darren Aronofsky. Watch it. So in the movie, this is like the before. What is it called? Beautiful Mind came out. So Pi in that movie, he also like goes, starts seeing numbers everywhere and all these things.
But look, what was I going to say? I was going to say two things.
Yeah.
First, I was going to mention Yeravam ben Avat. Now, and then I was going to mention historicity. Okay, just so I read so I don't forget because I was going from one thing to another. So Yeravam ben Avat was the breakaway from the kingdom of Judah, who established the kingdom of the 10 tribes. Yeravam ben Avat was on such a high level, he was able, in his wisdom, to challenge Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. And what Chazal say about him is that the entire generation was like kiklipat hashum, was like the shell of a garlic in comparison to his intellectual capacity. They were nothing.
Yeah.
And Chazal always find like what was the real issue in the most simplest psychological terms. They say it in the following story. Rav ben Avat was the person who created 2 golden calves. He made he's the big bad guy. The entire Sefer Melachim is all about he was like a sinner like Yeravam ben Avat, and he followed the path of Yeravam ben Avat.
He's like the gold standard.
He's the gold standard of the dark side.
Yeah.
Yes. And Chazal say that to express it in this following kind of story, parable, they say, God comes to Yeravam ben Avat, and he says to him, if you do tshuva, I'll cut you a deal. If you do tshuva, tomorrow you and me and Ben Yishai, David, are going to walk together in Gan Eden.
Oh, no, that's famous. Yeah.
And in the words of Drew Carey from the show, Yeravam says, who's on first?
Oh.
And God says, well, Ben Yishai is on first. Well, in that case, I ain't interested. Now, imagine for a moment, you go to a leftist professor, and you know many of these, and you say to them, would you still want to be there when Mashiach comes and the Beis HaMikdash is built if Kahana will be the Kohen Gadol? You know 100% if God is talking to them, they would say, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like that.
Yeah.
It's the psychology of.
You know what's funny? A lot of people.
So who's at the front? Are you a kid?
There are some people who believe that the state of Israel is Mashiach ben Yosef, and other people say that Kahana is Mashiach ben Yosef.
Well,
certain people, whatever.
Okay.
Speaking of Mashiach.
Well, it's a very profound insight into saying it's basically one simple psychological issue. You just haven't gotten over your daddy issues. Yeah. Basically, right? Just this isn't daddy issues, but it's like who goes first.
Yeah.
It's like the most brilliant mind. The most brilliant mind. So there's a story where the Chachamim were talking between them about how these brilliant minds just went off the deep end. I mean, Shlomo HaMelech at the end of his life. You're talking, like, what hope do we have? So one of the Chacham is walking down the street, and of course he meets Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi asks Eliyahu Hanavi, So how what chance do we have? Like we're not nowhere near as smart as these people. I mean, these people would have convinced us. Like Rav Yaakov Weinberg says, what do you think Yerovam ben Nevat told the people when he told them we're going to make 2 golden calves? I mean, come on, don't you know about the golden calf? So he tells them, of course it was the wrong thing to do it. It was just the wrong time. Obviously, it's the concept is the correct concept. It just wasn't. You can see that, right?
The more we have this conversation, the more I realize that I can only speak for myself that we live in a very fortunate generation because we got to see, the Jewish people coming back to the land of Israel, and for me, there's really nothing. I mean, this is the most powerful thing. Like, I was speaking to my grandmother today, and I told her, she was talking about, like, religious people in Israel and this and that. Huh?
I'm looking for a medrash.
Oh.
Keep going.
So I was like, I asked her a question. I'm like, do you think, and this is actually our, Yehuda Cohen asked this question, if the Chinese people, 1 billion people got kicked out of China thousands of years ago, do you think they'd come back 2,000 years later? And so now the question is, why did they come back? What's the purpose? Who orchestrated this? And really, there's nothing else. If you think about it, are you thinking about it?
Well, I heard the question. Okay, I'm just looking. I'm looking for a particular midrash. Darn it, I can't find it.
So, I mean, for me, I don't think I'd be a Torah Jew today if there was no Israel and if I didn't get a chance to live in Israel and experience what I experienced for various reasons, like cultural and intellectual, and because honestly, when you live in Israel, we talk about like logic, all these things, sometimes that you see things over there that really defy all these things. I mean, you see it if you want to see it. A lot of Israelis really don't. They just live there and they just kind of like go about their lives and they're like, okay, whatever. So much stuff that I saw over there that I didn't see here, I've never seen here. Experience that I'm just like, there's got to be someone running this whole show.
Here, look. This is the Gemara in Baba Batra Kafeh Amud Bet 25b. Said Amar Rav Bar Papa. We say the Masechet Rav Bar Papa, Avar Bar Papa, Rabba, all the Bar Papa. So Rav Bar Papa Amar Rav Chisda. מיום שחרב בית המקדש אין הגשמים יורדים מאוצר הטוב, שנאמר יפתח השם לך את אוצרו הטוב. So Rav Bar Papa says, in the name of Rav Chisda, from the day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the rains no longer descend from the good storehouse, etc., etc., as it says. בזמן שישראל עושים רצונו של מקום, וישראל שרוין על אדמתם, but in the time when we do the will of God, and Israel is dwelling on their land, גשמים יורדים מאוצר טוב. On that time, then we have like the good rains. בזמן שאין ישראל שרוין על אדמתם, but when Am Yisrael are not there on their land, אין גשמים יורדים מאוצר טוב. You don't have good rain in Israel. And you look at, this is more variations of this, but the point is, I think one of them is En lecha ketz megule mise. Let me look that one up too. But the point here is that the fact that the land is suddenly become fertile from the time when we come back, where it was a desert before that, which with a few visitors, it was like whatever, many invaders came through Israel, the whole history, but it wasn't a very big society. Like Jerusalem was important to the few of the religions, but the country was just
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly the country just awakens. I mean that.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's what I told this once to a bunch of lefties. I said it in a different way. I said I didn't have that vernacular that the Torah vernacular, and I said, well, look at what the land was before we came back. All these people lived there, and nothing grew for them when we came back, and they're like, oh,
here, this is the Gemara.
Racist. I'm like,
this is the Gemara.
Giving you history, man. Like it's. The question is, what do we see?
Here, this is the pasuk that Amichai Luria put on the wine. Yechezkel Amid Vav. This is Amar Rabbi Abba en lecha ketz megule mize. You have no such. The most obvious revealed end of days is V'atem arei Yisrael anvechem titenu u'ferichem tisau l'ami Yisrael. Is when Bnei Yisrael are there on their land, the trees will start giving you fruit. Rabbi Eliezer Omer mizeh shene'emar ki lifnei hayamim hem schar adam lo niyah, etc.,
So
etc.
here's my question: people who grew up in Israel, people who live in Tel Aviv, the secular society, whatever it is, what are they not seeing, or why are they not seeing the same things that we're seeing? What is causing them to be blind? I mean, it can't just be the media and this and that. It cannot be just like what they see on TV and somebody's convincing them. there's
Well,
something going on. There's some kind of malfunction here. What is your major, like, was it Full Metal Jacket? What is your major malfunction?
Instead of answering that question directly, I'll tell you about a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who works in Bar Ilan University with bridging the gap between secular and religious Jews in Israel, in actually working with 12th graders and trying to get them to understand that in order to have a democracy, we need to have some sort of mutual understanding to have dialogue. So let's take a very hot topic that is very emotional for everyone and break it down to the material so that you can have a conversation instead of shouting at each other.
Like Shabbat must
Marriage.
this argument.
Marriage.
Yeah, marriage.
Holy matrimony.
Yeah.
We are gathered here today. Just say I do. What is marriage according to Jewish law? What are the sources? What is it in secular law? What does it mean? Why is it important? Etc. 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 Now we can actually have a conversation which can lead to legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to her, in having conversations about how what I do can be relevant to Israeli society, I said, let's just take one small example.
Mm-hmm.
In the Israel Museum, you go to anything biblical and have a presentation where here's how a religious Jew with Emunat Chachamim would look at it. Here's how a secular Jew with just general history would look at it. And now, how is it that he reached this conclusion and you reached this conclusion?
That wasn't even my question. I mean, I get what
No,
you're saying. My question is about experiential.
I am
living
saying
in the land.
that in terms of how is it that they're constantly seeing past each other. You're seeing it and they live it but don't see it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who see it but don't like.
Yeah.
How is that? What's being missed? So I'm trying to create that dialogue so that conversation happens.
But you think that that's the point is to even have a dialogue about it? Because I feel like it's just it either happens for people or it doesn't. I feel like some people Hashem closes their eyes and some people Hashem opens.
Some people are
You're
not. Some people are not open to hearing.
Not hearing, to seeing.
Yeah.
Perceiving.
Well, you know what they say about
hearing.
miracles. Outside of Israel, you have to open your eyes wide to see them. In Israel, you have to shut your eyes not to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So how do you even Tel Aviv, you walk around like you gotta be I don't know what, like.
Well, you know what they say about the 6-Day War.
Yeah.
You know, people who were the complete secular were going Yisrael b'tach b'Hashem, putting it on their tanks. Yeah, but the moment it was over, it's like, the odds and yeah, I know. It's very easy to just deny what you've seen and experienced. Okay, we're dealing with that as a society, but I think that as a society, people are speaking past each other. And I think that one of the things that's happening for the secular mind is however I'm not really sure they're thinking about it. That's the thing.
Some people are, but they're just going in another direction.
They end up, right. So if you think about it, you become very, very involved in the historicity.
Well, that's why a lot of Israelis after the army, they go to like India and Thailand and stuff because they're searching.
It's also they're searching for meaning, and very often what happens is that they meet some ashram, some guy. No, actually some guy in ashram is like, "You're Jewish. What do you need here? What do you need from us?"
That's what Daniel Katz. He sat. There's a whole story. He sat with the guy for like silence for 2 hours, like the silent ashram, and the guy finally speaks to him for 2 minutes. He's like trying to drive home the point of Buddhism that you need to, in order to reach this nirvana, whatever it is, you need to leave the world. So for like 2-3 conversations with this guy, this Guru Steve guy, Daniel Katz could not get it through his thick skull, this idea. So the guy goes, "Can I ask you a question? Are you Jewish?" He's like, first he said no, and then he admitted that he's Jewish, and he's like, "Why'd you ask me if I'm Jewish?" He's like, "You Jewish guys, you always have that issue. It's always a Jewish guy that has that issue. You guys could never understand why you have to leave the world to reach nirvana. You always want to be have a problem with that." And then I realized that that's our thing. We have in the world and mitzvahs.
That's really what I say in the Chinese galleries on one of my tours. Abraham's journey. Say Abraham is always in the centers of civilization, talking to people, and the idea of nirvana is to be a hermit on the mountaintop. And you read Siddhartha, and you're like, "Oh wow, that's so." I had a neighbor who almost became a Buddhist because of Siddhartha. Maybe he was like, "That's the complete opposite of Judaism." It's just like, I have no responsibility for anything for that kid that hates me, for this I screwed up with. It doesn't matter. It's all karma. It's all this. Right, and it's like there are those aspects. I mean,
I had a friend he was actually my Havrusa, partially or Habura, maybe whatever. And I remember on his wall, Facebook wall, he lives in Nachliel, he's one of these guys. But nice, whatever, not so hippie. And he writes on his wall, he goes, I have fantastic middos as long as you don't push me. Like, I have great midot when there's no people around.
Did you see?
Or,
What was that?
I feel the same.
Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson, Anger Management,
Yes,
where they get back
exactly.
at that ashram, at that kid who used to like wedgie him,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, peace and love," and he manages to get him really angry.
Oh, he says like I have fantastic midot until somebody
You
pushes
scratch him a little bit.
pushes
You
my
say-
buttons.
You scratch him a little bit, as they're saying.
I'm in the same kind of realm, you know. And I think that's I think about it sometimes. Why did I have to come back to America? When I was in Israel, you're like in Israel, especially when you're in yeshiva. There's really everybody's just like working on themselves. Everybody's going to like shiurim. Everybody's like nice little angels. And then I got back to America. There's a lot of stuff that like Hashem is like, you have good midos, huh? Okay, let's see how fantastic. Let's see how great your emunah is. Let's see how great your midos are. You have to come back to America, to New York, and deal with your family, and deal with these people, and deal with those people. Let's test that theory out. Like, massive fail. Massive. Like I admit it. Massive fail.
System failure.
Exactly.
System.
No, it's been really
Abort.
it's been an avoda, I'll tell you. And then I saw that guy post the thing, like I've been,
What's the name in Odyssey 2001? What's the name of the
Hal.
character?
Hal.
No, what's the name of the people he talks to?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I cannot do that.
I don't remember the people. Yeah, but yeah.
I'm sorry.
You know Hal is IBM.
Yeah, I know.
It's just the letters
It's
after
halacha.
from before.
Okay. Well, so there's this one idea which I think is, there's a lot. There's like Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi wrote about this in Zachor, about the concept of Jews and their attitude towards memory. Where on the other hand, we're really focused on Zachor, which I didn't read it cover to cover. I read a lot of the book, and I think it's something that needs to be discussed. I mean, I understood that in Jewish history studies, this is like the Bible, right? Except the person who challenged it and said, what the heck is going on here, and made fun of it, is the guy we spoke about, Amos Funkelstein. When he critiqued the book, which he did not like at all, Yerushalmi was like, I don't know what he's talking about. My professor said, I'm convinced that he actually did not understand what Funkelstein was talking about. But the whole concept of our attitude towards memory and don't forget, but on the other hand, we're very selective about what we want to remember, and we don't really care much for historicity, with the small exception of Josephus, until the German Wissenschaft.
I tried to read 2 Shabbats ago, Wars of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the English translation. It's just like one sentence. I mean, I guess it's the way whoever translated it.
Okay, yeah.
It's really it's a difficult. I mean, it's just like very descriptive. It's about the Romans, this guy, this general, this guy, like political maneuverings and all these things. It's just very like. I thought it was gonna be more like on a philosophical kind of slant.
It's also important to read Philo of Alexandria, to read the Book of Maccabees. It's important to read these books.
Why wasn't Book of Maccabees like canonized? Why was
Here's another example.
or turned into a
according to
what's it called?
Tanakh,
Megillah.
it was that was written. First of all, the canonization of Tanakh was somewhere either in the Persian period or in the Hellenistic period. That really depends who you follow.
Yeah.
Chazal say it was in Knesset Gdolah, and the reason that there was a few considerations. One of them, why it needed to be canonized in the first place, is you started having. I think it's too early for some Christianity, but other people were saying we also have our prophecies, and whatever. So like, okay, we got it. Just here's it. No more prophecy after this.
And what happened to Yom Nicanor also?
Yom Nicanor is one of those things in Megillat Ta'anit, which was just buried, so nobody knew about it. But then we found Megillat Ta'anit in the Geniza and whatever. Like, oh,
that was a big. It was like today.
Of course, it was a big deal.
Like one of these Chabad holiday kind of deal, but except for the whole nation.
Yeah, Yom Nicanor is a big deal.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
So it's like
it's in Megillat Ta'anit again. There's a whole bunch of them.
But it's interesting.
A lot of
with Purim, you have the Megillah.
But Purim happened at the very beginning of the Second Temple, right? This is already Maccabees, and at this point, like things have been, so to speak, corrupted, and also the book itself is written in a very non-godly sort of way.
Militaristic, like we did.
So, for example, if you want to talk about what exactly happened on Hanukkah, so you read Maccabees 1, Maccabees 2, right, and you read Antiquities. There's no mention of the oil. There's a mention of the battles. The only mention of the 8 days was that the Greeks didn't allow us to keep Sukkot, which was 8 days, and so we did that. Okay, fine. And then you get to the Gemara, and the Gemara talks about the light. Okay, but then you read the Aruch HaShulchan, who's a 19th century very accepted halachic authority, who knew Josephus and knew Maccabees, and he also writes that the issue was the 8 days of Sukkot, as opposed to the miracle. So what? So how do you understand the miracle of the light, which by the way only shows up in the Talmud Bavli, not in the Yerushalmi? There's a reason for what I'm doing right now, by the way.
So why wouldn't these guys Maccabees mention this?
Well, first of all, the miracle that happened, according to this, would basically mean God is affirming what they chose to do.
Yeah.
But they didn't see it as specifically being something that, okay, fine, so we had a miracle, and we got enough light until then, but the reason we chose 8 days was actually because of Sukkot. We finally got to celebrate, but we couldn't celebrate that, so we're celebrating this, because it's not Sukkot time.
Yeah.
So there's that, and the fact that Chazal say that the next year, when they found somehow they spiritually detected the essence of that light in the candles, they realized like, oh, this is actually something that was unique, and it's in the fabric of time as opposed to. So that's how we generally look at it with the Emunas Chachamim. But you realize that what I did now was take you on a journey which a secular Israeli would basically say like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Acrobatics.
No, it's very straightforward. It's like, here's a record from the time. Here's a record from a few hundred years after the time, which inserts into there something which the people at the time didn't say ever happened.
No.
Like what? Like okay.
No.
What is to stop you from saying, okay, so it was inserted, and it wasn't done in Babylon. It was not done in the Talmud in the Jerusalem
How
Talmud.
convenient!
That it didn't happen in the local Talmud, which is much earlier. I mean, it's not earlier, but it was redacted earlier.
Yeah.
So there's these questions. How do you deal with them? So if you have Emunas Chachamim, then you're going to look at this one way. And if you don't, even though you can be very respectful of Chazal, you're going to inevitably say, look, this is how things develop, this is how memory works, this is how history and narrative works, and therefore it makes a lot of sense that we would insert that value into there, even though... So how do you bridge that gap? Do you need to bridge that gap? I don't know, but these are the things I'm dealing with, because this is a very light example, but there's examples where you realize... once you start reading people who've really studied this stuff and they know the archaeology, they know the history, they know the manuscripts, they know the Talmud, and it's like you start getting stuck in a way that's hard to stay innocent. And so what do you do then?
So what now is the hop of the fact that the holiday that celebrates the defeat not only of the Greeks but of Hellenism is the most celebrated, and Hashem orchestrated this. It's funny how it worked out. But it's the most celebrated holiday besides like Yom Kippur maybe and Pesach by all Jews.
Well,
I mean, at this point it's a cute Sandler song, but lighting
but
this.
It's not. It's not. It's the modern Zionist agenda chose.
Talking about America.
No. But listen, this is how it works. They consciously chose Hanukkah because of the whole concept of anti-exile Jew. The anti-exile Jew. So the Jew always, the exiled Jew was, the power of the spirit, which we read in Zechariah about the menorah, lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, not by might, not by strength, but rather by my spirit. Suddenly we have strategy, military might. That is a very non-exilic attitude.
But no one knows about this anymore. They don't even know what
people
Hanukkah is about.
know this, but the point is, it's been around for 70 years, and that revival, the impact on world Jewry as a secular association with Jewish power, strength, and resilience, this is new.
Yeah.
If you go through all of the old texts about anything at all about Hanukkah, nobody talks about this.
And also because it's close to, in America, it's kind of like around Christmas time there, and then, Jews want to have their own thing going on. It's like kind of...
Okay, however it happened, but the point is that this is a novel idea where we celebrate the military aspect of it, and that brings a lot of all these songs which people don't even realize. For example, Mao Zedong was 13th century.
Oh, okay.
But Yemei Chanukah, Chanukat Mikdashenu, Begilu v'Simcha, Memalim et Libenu. So those kinds of modern songs. One of them is Al Anisim ve'Al Aniflaot. What's the words? Asher Cholelu HaMaccabim, the miracles and wonders which the Maccabees brought about. Can you even say that? Are we allowed to say that?
It's clear.
Right, and it's Kochi ve'Otzim Yadi. But those words were designed, there's more than that. There's songs about the Maccabees and the glorifying of Metzada. Never again. I mean, Metzada, those guys...
Oh, the guys that stabbed in themselves.
The guys I'm saying, these guys were very much...
They're like Al-Qaeda. They wouldn't be caught alive.
So you have that. This is the fact that the state of Israel has chosen to focus on Mitzvah, and even Bar Kochva, right? When Bar Kochva was a failure, but Bar Kochva, Rabbi Akiva supported him.
Failed Messiah.
It was a failed Messiah. But all these things that the state of Israel has consciously chosen as images and icons and ideas and anthems and mottos, this is reshaping the vision of the Jew and projecting it backwards. Because we feel embarrassed by being the exiled Jew.
There's no more Woody Allen, there's no more Larry David, there's only
Mel Brooks.
Yes.
Even in the Spanish Inquisition, Jews are going, oi.
Well, I in one of my videos recently, I at the end of the video, I pointed to the camera and I said, I told all these Hasidic Jews who live in Williamsburg and Borough Park, I told them, I'm like, I know this is not your thing. I know you're not the Jew who lives in the same type of Jew that lives in Judea and Samaria. I know that. With all due respect, if you're not ready to go to Israel, if you're going to stay here, you better become some version of that, because you have no choice now.
Well,
instead of being like the scrawny guy who just sits in the basement. I mean,
you've had ups and downs and currents in these things. Right now, because of the attacks, people are starting to. I mean, you have to.
But they see like, listen. I went to a shul. I mean, I went to that mikveh that I told you about across the street from where the attack was, and for the first time, I saw there's a code there now. There's a lock.
Yeah.
There was never a lock. You just walk in, waltz in. That's it. And I was like, punching the code. And
Unfortunately, So how do we deal with seeing historic developments? It's very interesting. Like, so do you go back and look at the prophets and then say like, okay, so therefore everything they said is true, and therefore like, do you do that? Do you want to do that? How do you explain it? I don't know. It's.
I just know that we live in a time where everything's accelerating.
Yeah.
The whole process. Everything's going on in Israel now. Everything that's
and
going on in America now.
Like
everything that's going on with this Iran thing. That's what it was like. I mean, people didn't realize how big this was. I saw that somebody tweeted it at night before I went to sleep, and like it says Soleimani was killed, and I follow like all this foreign policy stuff.
So you know who Soleimani was?
Oh my. Yeah.
Like the world just changed.
I was like, this is big. No one realized. And then like the next morning, I wake up, I see on Twitter, they're like, you said it. Lefties, we started World War III. I'm like, no.
I prevented it.
I'm like, well, number one, maybe, but number two, Mashiach is coming. But not because of whatever cataclysm, but because these things are happening, and we're about to resolve something that has needed to be resolved.
We're caught in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But to just go from the fact that we're seeing these things take place to therefore asserting the validity or value or a particular interpretation of all the other package,
or some obscure midrash.
Yeah, that's going to be very hard for people to accept.
It's difficult, isn't it? Even I know I spoke to a Talmud
Chacham
who can't accept it.
Sometimes you can't accept it.
I spoke to a Talmud Chacham who thinks it's silly.
Which part is?
Well, I told him I'm like there's a Yalkut Shimoni, it talks about Arabia and Iran and Persia and Edom and all these counseling, and he's just like he goes, you want to base bombing a country on some midrash that may or may not be talking about the times that we live in. I'm like, I don't base anything. I just
these midrashim are analyzing verses.
Obscure, yeah.
And those verses, as the Rambam says, we will not. There's no tradition as to Kabbalah as to what they mean. We will only really like any midrash about them is basically trying to figure out more or less what they're trying to say, but we don't really know.
Yeah.
We will only know ex post facto.
Well, to make our friend Hananel happy, why would Shimon Bar Yochai not quote, but mention a country at the time that he lived that did not even exist yet as an entity, as one of the signs that the country would have to have some kind of a conflict in it called Yemen, as of this one of his 10 signs of Mashiach.
But let me
just a question.
Throw something out of left field at you from scholarship. Two things. Number one, dating the Zohar. So you know that while you can say perhaps there was some sort of tradition and it was written down, and the scholarship will tell you it was, in order to make it popular, you use Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That if you actually analyze the character of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, how he's expressed there, and the type of Aramaic that they use, and you compare it with the Talmud, you're going to realize it's two different characters. So what do you do about that?
I can't wait to go to Meron and for that damn song to get stuck in my head yet again.
But you realize that with this type of thinking, you can see how it would just undermine the person's capability to experience.
Yeah, you just plug things in.
So I don't have that problem.
No.
But what is it about? What is it about me that doesn't? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
You grew up in the old city.
Yeah, but how do I explain that? How do I do? I
no
don't
way,
know.
There's no way to explain it.
Yeah, but you have to be able to. So I use that to create conversation. But look,
There
here's
was-
another one.
yeah.
Here's another one. Who was this? Forgot the guy's name. Not Joseph Gutman. Whole series on different rabbis, and what he pointed out is that
This is an
the
Israel.
one of the scholars in
Oh.
Hebrew University, whatever,
Okay.
one of the probably JTS, but he points out that but you just by analyzing the character and how he's mentioned, the Rabbi Akiva of the Talmud is not the Rabbi Akiva of this medrash, is not the Rabbi Akiva of that medrash, and it changes over time. You can trace how the character is a very particular flat character here, and here he's a very colorful
It's
character.
kind of like if
People hated him for
it's
it.
like the Darth Vader of George Lucas, of Mel Brooks. It's Helmet.
God,
Same guy but different.
my gosh.
Deal.
I always have coffee when I watch my radar. Don't I, men? Sir, yes, sir.
What a movie.
Yeah, but look,
Sorry.
if you are able to point that out, you are going to create a lot of little koifrim.
Yeah.
You're going to.
Yeah.
Because
It's like the
why does that not bother me?
Yeah.
Maybe because I don't know enough about it. I don't know.
No.
But for somehow I feel like that doesn't. So I just had a conversation with my friend Peter, right? He was saying, at the end of the day, after all is said and done, if all of the things that it said about I wouldn't say that, what is really a foundation of our story? We had to have left Egypt. I mean, God created the world. There's the choosing of Klal Yisrael. He didn't say that. That's taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
We had to have left Egypt, and we had to have had some sort of revelation at Sinai. I don't care about the numbers. I don't care about the years. But those two things had to have happened in some way, shape, or form. If they didn't happen, it all falls apart.
Kuzari principle, whatever it is.
Yeah, but some people have even undermined the fact that the Kuzari story ever happened.
Yeah.
So what do you do when these things come in?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Do you throw it all out the window? But you know people who are simply being very intellectually honest who did, and you confronted her at that show.
I confront her.
Yeah, you said,
I
why did you throw the baby with the bathwater?
No, I asked her about experientialism, and like just because you grew up in this society doesn't mean,
But that's all she knows.
Yeah, she knows a culture, but how does the culture point to, philosophy? Like, what does one have to do with the other? You know, what does have to do with presidency in China? That was really my question to her. I was like, okay, your father maybe, her father was the Kirov, right? You know.
To her, Kirov was to be Mikarov to that silly little thing, which she is.
To the Cholent.
Right, and it's not Cholent. And that Cholent doesn't speak to a lot of other people. I was speaking to this Syrian person who was telling me that when she was in high school, her parents sent her to this Hillel Kirov thing, I guess because she didn't know what else to do with her. And she's just asked the rabbi the rabbi was telling some question about some tzaddik in some European country, which just did not make any impact on her. She's like, so why does that matter? And he just wanted to kick her out. Yeah. She's like, I'm just a Jew coming from a different place. Like, what do you want?
Tell me about Baba Saleh. I want to hear about.
Whatever. So that's kind of. But anyway, we're dealing with some really serious things, and like I used to say this about the Joker, the attack of the movie, the Joker, the nihilist, the Joker, the cynic. Mm-hmm. The challenge that concept, the Joker, presents in terms of postmodernism, is so beyond the.
Speaking of, keep talking. I'll show you something.
The understanding of the average yeshiva guy that the yeshiva guy is actually safe from it because he just doesn't even understand it. But had they understood it, I don't know how many would stand a chance. What are you showing me?
So my cousin he went to a shir last night.
Yeah.
Went to Shabbos.
The phone keeps beeping, by the way.
Yeah. And the shir was given by. Here. There's a book that was written, Rabbi Shimon Gershon Rosenberg. You know this person?
Okay.
The book is called Faith Shattered and Restored. Rabbi Shagar.
Rav Shagar.
Shagar. I mean, it says Rabbi Shagar, Shimon Gershon Rosenberg.
He's known as Rav Shagar.
Faith and Shattered and Restored: Judaism in the Postmodern Age. Translated by Eli Lushem. edited by
I know his student.
Zohar Maor, preface by Ari Rubin, afterward by Rabbi Shalom Karmi. This is written, when was it written? 2017. So
He's not so long ago.
so I didn't read this book, but it's that's the title.
Which is what? Judaism and?
Judaism in the postmodern age. Basically, it's called Faith Shattered and Restored. Judaism in the postmodern.
I'm looking for what it's called in Hebrew because he's a famous author.
Yeah.
I think I have one of his books.
So I want to check this out.
I never knew what Chagall stands for.
Chagall. See, this is just a preview. I want to actually buy the book. So they went to a shir by another rabbi who was talking about the book and this. Whatever.
Let's see what shows up. יהדות וחיים מודרניים. Okay, let's just go Arav Shagar. I mean, I can just Arav Shagar.
Just type in Faith Shattered and Restored.
I can't get it. Why can't it erase? Arav Shagar Emuna.
Here. Faith Shattered and Restored. Judaism postmodern age. Amazon. They have it. Yeah.
I'm looking for what the name of the book is.
$22 here. Oh, you want a
In
Hebrew?
In Hebrew.
I think they, yeah. Let's see, maybe they have the Hebrew thing.
Kelim Shvurim.
See, it says, shaped a generation of Israelis who yearned to encounter the divine in a world progressively at odds with religious experience.
What's the Kelim Shvurim? Torah וציונות דתית בסביבה פוסט-מודרנית.
Yeah.
Kelim Shvurim is taken from Kabbalah.
Oh, interesting. Which one means what?
Shviras HaKelim.
Oh, like breaking up.
The breaking. Kelim Shvurim. Torah and Zion and religious Zionism in a postmodern Zionism, 2003.
Nurturing religious faith with a cultural climate of corrosive skepticism, possessing the rare ability to stare into the abyss of doubt with an unflinching gaze. Rabbi Shagar offers profound and often acutely personal insights that marry existentialist philosophy and Hasidism, Talmud, and postmodernism. With a preface by blah, 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 blah.
Okay, these are things that need to be studied.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, these are the conversations that need to be had in order to really deal
this book
with
is, a couple of years ago written.
It says 2007. I mean, he passed away in 2007, so it was he passed away in 2007. So
but you know what?
the book was translated into English.
Probably relevant.
Anyway. All right, but these are some serious. There's some serious developments that are going on, and there's some serious conversations that need to be had. And I feel like I've somehow been thrown into it. I didn't plan this. It kind of scares me. I just find myself in the situation where I'm dealing with these things, and I'm not ready to challenge them, to face them yet. But I'm building up.
I find myself in a situation where I want to deal with them, and I want to have conversations, and I feel like there's like establishments here, even in the cure world, that they don't even want to have that conversation. And anybody who they produce, namely me, who asks these questions, it's like Skynet is self-aware.
Skynet.
They don't want to talk to Skynet no more. They just want to ignore Skynet at best.
Yes, that's not going to work. That's not going to work for very long. It's really not going to work.
You know,
for very long.
and they definitely don't want Skynet talking to other specimens. The blanks, hard drives.
Okay, so here we are.
Here we are.
Biting the bullet. I mean, not biting the bullet. Going into paradise, into Pardes.
Chaos.
And coming out alive without becoming kofrim.
Yeah.
We started with that, with Emunat Chachamim. Wow, 53 minutes. I think we should end here.
It's all good, man.
All right, we got to upload this one.